Transmigration, otherwise known as reincarnation or metempsychosis, means that a post-mortem self, usually called the soul, survives physical death and is reborn into the bodies of other living creatures. This notion was well known in the Greco-Roman world and was thought to have come from Egypt. The doctrine had roots in both Orphic and Pythagorean lore. Now, not many Christians asserted the doctrine of transmigration in the 2nd and early 3rd centuries CE. In fact, the only known Christians who clearly taught transmigration during this time were Alexandrians, namely Basilides, Carpocrates, and the Nicene preacher. In this two-part video, I'll explore how these thinkers grounded reincarnation in the biblical witness and how they fit it into their Christian worldview. At the end, I'll also discuss two other sources for early Christian transmigration, namely the Secret Book of John and, the big surprise, Clement of Alexandria. I'm Dr. David Litwa, and if you support free evidence-based content, I hope that you'll subscribe to this channel, check out my published works, and join my online school, the Gnosis Academy. Here you'll find the majority of my courses in the fields of Gnostic and Hermetic studies, the New Testament, and early Christianity. If you want summaries of scholarly literature, you can sign up for free on my website, the Gnostic Archive. All the links are in the description. Alexandrian theologians typically understood reincarnation through the filter of Plato. According to Plato, transmigration was a tool of divine providence used to train and to purify the soul for heavenly life. Earthly life was a kind of purgatory, and a soul would be re-embodied on earth as often as was necessary for it to be purified. Purification here is chiefly moral purification, that is, the control or suppression of our violent habits and emotions. According to Plato's Timaeus, if a man fails to master his emotions and to live justly during life, he is born a second time, now as a female. And if he still does not refrain from vice, he is changed once again, this time into some wild animal that resembles the wicked character he had acquired. And he has no rest from these toilsome transformations until he conforms his mind to the steady and rational motion of the stars. Now, although Origen thought that transmigration was an ancestral doctrine among the Jews, there is slim evidence for Jewish authors in antiquity upholding reincarnation. Sami Uli Karyanma has made a case that Philo of Alexandria accepted a doctrine of reincarnation. David Arunia acknowledges reincarnation as a theme in Philo's works, but casts doubt on the idea that Philo was seriously committed to this idea. Of course, one can maintain a thesis without serious commitment. Those interested in Philo can check out my videos on him, as well as my book review of Uli Karyanma's Reincarnation in Philo of Alexandria. But we do know that a variety of early Christian theologians put forward a doctrine of transmigration. Most of them viewed it as part of a larger system of providence. God allows souls to be punished and purified by being shunted into various bodies. The managers of this system, however, were typically lower beings, sometimes called angels, daimones, or archons. Let's begin with the figure of Basilides, who flourished in Alexandria during the early 2nd century, the reign of Hadrian. In actual quotations of Basilides, he never mentions the idea of reincarnation, but there are 3 fragments which assert that either he or his followers affirm this doctrine. 2 of these fragments mention how Basilides or his heirs interpreted the Bible to discover transmigration. We don't know, however, if the interpretations were asserted as firm truths or simple hypotheses. The first fragment is as follows. Quote, "For the apostle said, because I was once living without the law, that is, before I came into this body, I lived in that kind of body which is not under law." A body of a cow or bird, I'm sure. In this interpretation of Romans 7:9, Basilides pointed out that Paul once lived apart from law. But what law? Origen thought it referred to natural law, not the Torah. But Paul had just quoted one of the Ten Commandments in Romans 7, verse 7, namely, do not desire or do not covet. I thus reject the interpretation that the law referred to here is a kind of general law applying to all humanity. The law here refers to Jewish law or Torah. Since Paul, as a Jew, was born under law, there was technically no time for him to have lived apart from Torah. In the words of Origen, quote, "How can Paul be found ever to live apart from the law of Moses, seeing that he claims concerning himself that he is a Hebrew of Hebrews, and that, having been circumcised immediately on the 8th day, he has lived from birth on in the observation of Mosaic law?" For this reason, Basilides remarked, Paul must have been referring to a previous life different from the one he lived as a Jew under the law of Moses. The idea that Paul previously lived in the body of a cow or bird seems to be a snide comment of Origen, as indicated by the sarcastic "I'm sure" in Latin "scilicet." The fact that it is Origen imagining different types of animals here is shown by his later comment, quote, "How is it that certain people introduce from the phrase of the apostle where he says, quote, 'But I was once alive without the law,' the doctrine of transmigration, which teaches that the souls of men were previously in beasts or birds or fish and thus came to men," unquote. Platonists during Basilides' time disagreed about whether rational souls were born into animals. Some considered it unfit or impossible for a rational soul to inhabit a beastly body. They understood Plato to be speaking metaphorically about bad humans reborn as animals. Their behavior and lifestyle effectively made their life the life of animals. According to a later summary of this debate, quote, "Plato said that wrathful, proud, and grasping souls exchange bodies with wolves and lions, and that those who have run to excesses will receive the bodies of donkeys and other animals of that sort. Some took him to mean literal wolves, lions, and donkeys, and others thought that they discerned that he spoke in parables, and by naming animals alluded to manners of behaving. Cronius, for example, in his work on rebirth, will have it that souls always remain rational. The same view is taken by Theodore the Platonist, and Porphyry follows suit. But Iamblichus goes clean the other way and declares that there is a form of soul appropriate to each form of living creature, and that these forms differ from one another. He accordingly wrote a monograph in which he argued that there is no transmigration of souls from humans into non-rational animals, nor from animals into humans, but only from one animal into another, and from one human into another." End quote. In my view, Basilides and his followers did not teach the transmigration of human souls into animals. He was one among many Platonist interpreters who understood animal reincarnation metaphorically. There is perhaps a hint of the metaphorical interpretation of transmigration in Isidore's book on the excrescent soul, Isidore being Basilides' son and heir of his school. Isidore says that the spirits of a wolf, monkey, lion, and goat can attach themselves to the human spirit, inspiring the traits of these animals and humans. In brief, a human soul can be infected by a wolf spirit, as it were, but it's not downloaded into the body of an actual wolf. Let's look at another fragment, this one from Clement of Alexandria. Quote, "The passage that God pays back the disobedient to the third and fourth generation, the followers of Basilides speak in reference to incarnations." In short, Basilidian Christians cited Deuteronomy 5, verse 9, which belongs to the Ten Commandments, where God pays back the disobedient to the third and fourth generation. In Basilides' day, Greeks complained against gods and tyrants who punished lands or people for wrongs done generations ago. Marcion, for instance, pointed out the injustice of transgenerational punishment. It seems that Basilideans wanted to redeem God from unjust punishment, effectively protecting his character. Thus, Basilideans took a metaphorical interpretation of Deuteronomy 5:9. They took generation, in Greek genia, in the sense of birth, and referred it to multiple births. In this reading, the God is no longer unjust for punishing innocent children. Instead, he has a system of justice to punish disobedient souls for their own sin, the very same soul born into different bodies. And these souls relive 3 or 4 generations, that is, lives. Over the course of their rebirths, souls learn how to live justly. Now, we might ask who, according to these followers of Basilides, is the God who is referred to in Deuteronomy. Here, the Greek word theos doesn't have a definite article, which may signify a lower god. It was the Judean god or Lord who, of course, originally spoke the 10 Commandments. The Judean Lord would logically be the god in charge of transmigrations. He is the one who pushes sinful human souls back into bodies for 3 or 4 generations. Such was the Judean Lord's system of justice. In this framework, the Judean Lord is not necessarily evil. He seems more like a harsh judge who controls a system of human suffering. He keeps souls stuck in this cosmic system so that they can, apparently, learn how to obey his commandments, representing baseline morality. We turn then to our final fragment from Basilides. Quote, "The sermons of Basilides, which teach that it is indifferent to deny one's faith and to sacrifice to foreign gods, plague and corrupt the listeners no less than those which discourage people who fight for the truth to confess Jesus before human beings. They teach in these sermons that there are no other punishments for sins besides the transmigration of souls after death." Now, this fragment mentions sermons or speeches of Basilides. These speeches were evidently preserved by the followers of Basilides who used them in their teaching. Irenaeus had taught that Basilides considered eating sacrificial meat to be indifferent, but did Basilides teach such an ethic of indifference? It's quite tempting to depict Basilides as a student of Paul, who in 1 Corinthians 8 and 10 apparently accepted the idea that eating meat sacrificed to Greco-Roman gods is permissible in some cases. But we don't, in fact, know the Basilidean interpretation of these passages. More importantly, Basilides' extensive comments on martyrs show that he actually believed that martyrs should, in fact, make proper confession of their faith and that that was a sign of their election. If, according to Basilides, there is only forgiveness for involuntary sins, we might infer that there were likely other kinds of punishments put in place by lower lords to purify voluntary sins. We can hypothesize that for Basilides, transmigration was one of these purifying punishments. For Basilides, there was no hell. Sins are paid for in this life. And if we need to pay for more sins, we are simply reincarnated. There is no hell. This teaching, from Basilides' perspective, doubtless supports rather than undermines God's justice. It was, in fact, unjust for God to harshly and eternally punish a soul he created. Reincarnation means that the soul always has another chance to redeem itself. No punishment is vindictive or destructive. All punishment is remedial, designed to heal the soul.